many men who were detained in Guantanamo, many of whom we know to be innocent. We have strong evidence of, and all of whom we say that the government should just do what I never thought that I would say this. I'm agreeing with the sheriff's office here. We want something that's basic and simple. We just want these people to be held or released based on an order of the court. Nothing more. That's what habeas corpus is supposed to be. That's what it's always been. It's very fundamental. It's very basic. It does not mean that someone needs to get an entire trial at this point. What it means is that the government needs to be able to demonstrate that it has some factual and some legal basis to detain someone. The government has not been forced to do that with regard to any of these people. And so what I see in the denial of habeas corpus for the men detained at Guantanamo, and what I think is really important in terms of this discussion when we're talking about the national and the international perspective and the role of Guantanamo, is an effort to consolidate executive power, to be able to say that we do not have to be able to present the factual and legal basis for detention. All we need is to state that someone is this category of bad person from the highest level, and that has to be enough. That's the current state. That's essentially the current state of the laws as it applies to Guantanamo and the current perception of it from the executive. Guantanamo was established explicitly for this purpose. In this era, Guantanamo has existed for other purposes and other eras too, but in this era, it was established to be able to be an offshore penal colony where people could be held, non-citizens could be held outside of the rule of domestic or international law. That was very explicit from the beginning, and it's something that has been consistently pushed over the last 5+ years. So despite our best efforts and the best efforts of other organizations, including the ACLU and others, and I'm sure other individuals here who have been working on this and related issues, the government has thus far had relative success in being able to hold detainees at Guantanamo, hold non-citizens at Guantanamo outside of the rule of law. We've had some victories, and I just want to talk briefly about, and I think some of this has probably come up in last week's discussion, but a little bit of the chain of how things developed with regard to As soon as detainees arrived at Guantanamo, CCR represented a small number of detainees in habeas petitions. In a case called Rasul v. Bush, it took us 2 years for this case to reach the Supreme Court and to reach a victory in the Supreme Court in 2004. Now remember, habeas corpus is intended to be an effective and speedy remedy to challenge the divine right of kings to be able to detain people. An effective and speedy remedy. So 2002 we filed the case. 2004 the Supreme Court in Rasul v. Bush held that Guantanamo detainees have a right to challenge their detention in federal court. These habeas cases could go forward. That was a very short-lived victory, although lawyers have been going down and we've been able to more effectively represent people. It was a short-lived victory because almost immediately subsequent to that, the Congress passed the Detainee Treatment Act, and a portion of the Detainee Treatment Act stripped Guantanamo, attempted to strip Guantanamo detainees of the right to file habeas cases in federal court. We had another victory in the Supreme Court in 2006. And in 2006, the Supreme Court in Hamdan v. Rumsfeld held that the Detainee Treatment Act did not strip the detainees who had already filed cases of the right to continue to file cases. That was also a short-lived victory because immediately after that, very soon after that, the Military Commissions Act was passed. And there's information about the Military Commissions Act here, and I think you all have talked about this a little bit, but this is a really far-reaching law that was passed without much discussion on the eve of midterm election, where there was great concern that the Republicans were going to lose a majority, and this was the time to be able to pass something expansive. And so it was purportedly to establish military commissions to be able to try detainees at Guantanamo. Of course, many of the detainees at Guantanamo, the overwhelming majority, undisputed, the overwhelming majority, the government acknowledges this too, are not going to be tried. So why is this such a corrosive law? Because one portion of it, a much smaller portion of it, strips non-citizens who are held in U.S. custody, who were either classified as enemy combatants or awaiting determination about whether they will be classified as enemy combatants, held anywhere in the world, including in the United States, of the right to challenge their detention through habeas, to challenge their conditions of confinement, to challenge their transfer even to a country where they could be tortured, to challenge anything essentially related to their detention in a court of law. Incredibly, incredibly expansive. That has had the effect up until now of stalling our litigation, and we are about to reach the Supreme Court again. There was a little bit of a shuffle that was that raised the question of whether we were going to actually see the Supreme Court on this issue. If people are interested, we can talk about that. But we're expected to reach the Supreme Court by the end of this year on this question again. So over 5.5 years, this effective and speedy remedy is about to reach the court the third time, and the 350 plus men detained in Guantanamo have still, not a single one of them has had a hearing. So I just want to mention quickly some of the concrete effects of what the denial of judicial review has meant. It means that there are innocent people being detained, and there is no pressure on the government to be able to release people in a speedy way, or to be able to effectively review the reasons for the detention, or the evidence, if there is evidence of people's detention. So there's dozens of people who have been even cleared for release by the U.S. government, and they're still detained in Guantanamo some months or years after their detention. There were